Every time you ask an AI a question, somewhere in the world a meter ticks. Not a small meter, a turbine-scale meter, the kind that belongs on the side of a power station. We have built the most computationally demanding infrastructure in human history, and we have not yet seriously reckoned with what it costs. This is episode 1 of The Hidden Bill. Today, the state of AI's energy consumption. Not the hype, not the promise, the structural reality, and why it materially affects every capital allocation decision in the energy transition right now. In 2024, global data centers consumed roughly 400 terawatt-hours of electricity. AI workloads accounted for approximately 1% of global electricity demand, a figure that sounds small until you understand the trajectory. A single ChatGPT query uses between 3 and 5 times more energy than a standard web search. Training a frontier large language model requires energy equivalent to the lifetime emissions of 5 average cars. The IEA has projected that by 2026, data centers could consume more than 1,000 terawatt-hours annually. That is more electricity than Japan uses today. We are not dealing with incremental growth. We are dealing with a step change, and the grid was not designed for it. The energy transition was already the most complex infrastructure challenge of the 21st century. AI has added a demand variable that most grid operators, most energy modelers, and most capital allocators had not priced in. Every terawatt-hour consumed by a GPU cluster is a terawatt-hour that either delays decarbonization targets or requires new clean capacity to be built at a pace that markets have never delivered. That is the structural tension we are going to track in this series. In the next few minutes, the challenges that nobody has yet solved. Challenge number 1: the power grid. Hyperscale data centers require firm, uninterruptible power. They cannot run on intermittent renewables without substantial storage or backup. Yet the grid infrastructure needed to serve them, new substations, high-voltage transmission lines, interconnectors, takes anywhere from 5 to 10 years to permit and build in most OECD jurisdictions. Microsoft's campus in Racine, Wisconsin, Amazon's facilities in Northern Virginia, Google's sites across Iowa, all of them face the same bottleneck. There is simply not enough grid capacity in the right locations delivered at the speed that AI's growth curve demands. This is not a technology problem. It is a planning and permitting problem, and it is structurally slower than the capital that wants to deploy. Challenge number 2 receives far less attention. Water. Data centers use evaporative cooling, which consumes millions of liters of fresh water per day. A single large hyperscale facility can consume between 1 and 5 million liters daily. Across the global fleet, this places AI's infrastructure in direct competition with agriculture, municipal supply, and ecology, in many of the same regions already facing water stress from climate change. The challenge is compounded by geography. The locations with the cheapest land and power, inland, arid, flat, are frequently the locations with the least available water. This is a circular economy failure point that the industry has not yet structurally addressed. Risk number 1 sits on every hyperscaler's balance sheet, whether or not it has been recognized there. Major technology firms have made ambitious commitments to run on 100% renewable energy by 2030. Microsoft, Google, Amazon all have stated net zero targets. All of them have also seen their Scope 2 emissions increase materially as AI demand has grown. The risk is this: If grid decarbonization does not keep pace with AI's electricity appetite, and current trajectories suggest it will not in most major markets before 2030, then these commitments become credibility liabilities for companies with ESG mandates, for investors with Article 9 fund structures, for governments with legally binding carbon budgets. That is not an ethical risk, that is a regulatory and financial risk with material balance sheet implications. Risk number 2 is systemic, grid stability. Data centers are always-on loads. They do not flex with the grid. They cannot be switched off during peak demand events the way industrial processes sometimes can. As a result, adding large data center loads to grids that are simultaneously retiring baseload fossil capacity, coal and nuclear, creates a structural reliability problem. Ireland's grid operator, AirGrid, has publicly flagged this. Parts of the U.S. mid-Atlantic are experiencing transmission congestion. The Texas ERCOT market has been stress-tested repeatedly. The risk is not theoretical. It is a reliability and resilience challenge that every grid operator managing a significant data center footprint is now tracking and has no easy answer for. Let us talk about the money. In January 2025, the United States announced the Stargate Initiative, a commitment to deploy up to $500 billion into AI infrastructure over 4 years. Microsoft has committed to spending $80 billion on data centers in fiscal year 2025 alone. Google has announced more than $75 billion. Amazon Web Services has signaled comparable ambition. These are not R&D budgets. These are infrastructure capital commitments, the kind that lock in physical assets, energy contracts, and grid interconnection agreements for decades. The energy cost embedded in these commitments, the power purchase agreements, the substation investments, the transmission upgrades, represents a multi-trillion-dollar dependency on electricity infrastructure that does not yet fully exist. The headline CapEx figures are significant, but the life cycle cost picture is structurally more challenging and receives almost no public attention. A data center built today will operate for 15 to 25 years. Over that lifetime, electricity typically represents 60 to 70% of total operating cost. For a single 100 megawatt facility, that is hundreds of millions of dollars in electricity spend, at current prices, in current grid conditions, which are both materially uncertain over a 20-year horizon. Add to that cooling infrastructure replacement cycles, hardware refresh costs, water treatment, land lease obligations, and the carbon cost that will increasingly be priced into electricity through mechanisms like the EU Carbon Border Adjustment or Scope 3 mandatory disclosure frameworks, and the true cost of AI infrastructure is substantially higher than any prospectus currently indicates. This is not speculation. This is life cycle cost analysis applied honestly to an asset class that has thus far avoided it. None of what we have described is inevitable, but the solutions require structural honesty, not marketing language. First, demand-side efficiency. AI hardware efficiency is improving. Each generation of GPU delivers more compute per watt. Algorithmic efficiency is improving faster. The energy cost of a comparable AI task has fallen materially year over year. This trend is real, it is measurable, and it provides genuine reason to expect that energy intensity per unit of AI compute will continue to improve. The question is whether efficiency gains will outpace absolute demand growth. The evidence currently suggests they will not, but this is a race worth tracking. Second, purpose-built clean energy pairing. Several operators are now co-locating data centers directly adjacent to new nuclear, geothermal, and dedicated offshore wind capacity, bypassing the grid interconnection bottleneck entirely. This model, sometimes called behind the meter for AI, is structurally promising and deserves capital attention. Third, the Orbital Thesis. A small but structurally significant conversation has emerged around space-based compute, satellite platforms that operate in perpetual solar irradiance, beam processed results to Earth, and leave the thermal waste in orbit rather than on a stressed planetary grid. This is the subject of Episode 2. It is not a near-term solution, but it is a credible part of the long-term infrastructure picture that serious investors and policy teams are beginning to model. The energy reckoning for AI is not coming, it has already arrived. The question is not whether this costs something, the question is who pays it, in what form, at what point in the investment cycle, and whether the capital that should be flowing towards solutions has yet correctly identified the problem. If you are deploying capital into the energy transition, if you are advising on infrastructure strategy, if you are shaping the regulatory frameworks that will govern how this infrastructure operates, this is the signal you need to be tracking. Subscribe to Conscious Terra on Substack. Every week, curated intelligence at the intersection of AI, energy, orbital infrastructure, and the circular economy. Not noise, not hype. The structural picture with the primary sources to back it. Episode 2, Space-Based Data Centers. Is compute in orbit a real infrastructure thesis or a very expensive idea? We will see you there.